Thank you very much. Good morning. I don't know quite how I can physically multitask, so I'm going to try this. I'm going to try my clicker before anything else because I'm not... There we go, no. Here we go, right. I'm going to give you a little hexagon thinking this morning. See all my little hexagons. So my headline is that humans at work need hexagon thinking, which is the number of words that falls well within the cognitive limit. The same number of words were used very prophetically by Scott McNeely of Sun Microsystems in 1997 when he said, "You have zero privacy, get over it." And my headline for you is that what we think and know and do at the world of work 15 years from now, the same age that Facebook is, will not bear any relation to what any of us are going to talk about this morning. So the time horizon for my remarks are going to be time limited, with a bit of luck, to the next 15 months. But that's how dynamic everything is. And I'll come on a little bit to hexagon thinking, but it's basically a system around the most versatile, flexible, resilient, efficient, pervasive shape in the natural world: the hexagon, the snowflake, the soap dish, the honeybee, and the hexagon, and so on. And that is because we need all the help we can get because we're overloaded. So I'm going to give you some context, I'm going to lay out the problem, and hopefully give you a tiny little bit of solution. So I'm a pessimistic optimist is how I would frame my perspective. It's all awful, but we are the answer. The human in the machine is the answer. So I'm just going to give you some numbers. Anyone that watched Parliament Live last night knows, my goodness, it's all in the numbers. And my point about the numbers is we are way out of kilter with very big numbers and very, very small numbers. And that's the heart of our problem. There's a massive disconnect between machine-based, supercomputing, quantum computing numbers and us. And we have ignored that because we've been in love with scale and speed and mass. You know, big data is supposed to be a good thing. Well, it kind of is, but it's not really for us, for humans. So that number at the top represents 1,200 petaflops. Now, put your hands up if you've honestly ever heard of a petaflop. Good. A petaflop is a unit with 15 zeros after it. 1,200 petaflops is the supercomputing capacity, I understand as of this moment, generated by the FANGs. In other words, you know, a sliver of the sliver of the sliver are in charge of an enormous, not quite quantum computing, but a supercomputing, right, it's a big number. And actually, most of us go, yeah, whatever, give me another few zeros, yeah, I can bring it on, I'm good with big data. Another big number, 60 billion. 60 billion, I'm sure most of you know, is the number of messages exchanged every day on WhatsApp and Messenger alone. It also happens to be the dollar amount of tariffs imposed by China in the current war with Donald Trump. So it's, again, another big number. It's a freaky number, but it's a number that we're all living with and, in fact, contributing to. Then you drop to very, very, very small numbers. And the point I want to make is that the small numbers matter to us much, much more than the very, very big numbers, or at least they both matter. So 150, 168, and 200 are pretty similar numbers. 150 is the anthropological maximum number of relationships we can have. That's the Robin Dunbar number. You know, this is quite a Dunbar-ish number. It's a good number. It's present in lots of configurations, from ancient army configurations to villages. You know, it's a solid human number. I'll come back to 168. 200 is roughly speaking the number of functional countries in the world. give or take. You know, people come in and out of that list. But, you know, it's not 2,000 countries in the world. It's 200 nations. And 168, of course, affects every single one of us all the time. And it is the number of hours in the week. And I always love the fact that hardly anybody realises that. Like, please, can we connect to time being finite? But those numbers interest me because they're not unadjacent. Two other numbers, 34, a very human number. You are 34 times more likely to get things done face-to-face than you are on email. 23 is the number of minutes it takes all of us, in fact it's 23 and 17 seconds, but who's counting? 23 is, roughly speaking, the number of minutes it takes all of us to kind of regain our focus after we've been online. So given that we all pick up our devices 80 times a day, there's already a bit of a disconnect in terms of our attention and our ability to focus. 7 is pretty solidly the cognitive limit. In other words, you can't really hold more than 7 things at any given time. And therefore, my hexagon thinking model is based on the number 6, which happens to be mathematically perfect. Euclid of Alexandria discovered that 6 is literally the so-called perfect number in geometry, because it's kind of symmetrical and it represents the hexagon with its 6 sides, and it's under the cognitive limit. In other words, if you have one takeaway from my remarks this morning, think in 6s, don't do bigger than 6. Don't kid yourself, you can do more than 6 things with more than 6 people, future casting over more than about 6 weeks, because you kind of can't. And one, of course, well, we only have one life last time I looked. And the point of that is that what I would say is that there is a hierarchy of communication like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to understand that as social beings, what we like is intimacy. Scale, broadcasting, which has been the narrative for the last 15 years, mass email, mass market, mass communicate, is not a very robust way to connect with another human being. And even though that screws up capitalism, really, because you want to reach as many people and sell as fast to them as possible, we've really become very out of sync. So, in other words, the time you spend being face-to-face in a Facebook world and having a cup of coffee, even though that is an expensive use of your time, actually the yield is better because trust develops and intimacy develops more face-to-face than it does broadcasting. And there's a wonderful neuroscientist called Matthew Lieberman at UCLA, and he's written a really good book called Social. But he's done these magnetic resonance imaging brain scans, which shows that the default position of every single one of us with a healthy brain, not a sort of significantly malfunctioning brain, at rest, all the time, is really one thing only. And that one thing, we're all doing it now, our motor is running on it now, is who loves me and who do I love? So you can go mass, you can reach a gazillion people, but that's not really what they care about, and it's not really what you care about. So it's very important that we frame that properly. I've already had a triple espresso. I'm certainly going to have at least one more. I just want to give you the problem in a nutshell. If we were credit rating agencies, we'd give ourselves a AAA credit rating. Well, the world of work has a AAA rating, which is at no time in 150 years have we ever had more stress than these 3 things put together, which is automation, aging, and attitude. Automation, I'm not even going to go there. You know all the data. The robots are coming. If they're not coming, we're being required to skill up. It's all a bit of a challenge and a nightmare. Aging, we're getting older. We've got the 100-year life, as Linda Grattan has put it. And we've never had the 5 generations working together in one place. The 6th generation, the alphas, are coming on board. So it's all pretty crazy. And with it comes attitudes, massive cultural and attitudinal shifts. The two that I would just like to highlight are purpose. You know, I'm not such a fan of the P word, but it's out there. And certainly the younger generations think they know what purpose is and they want it. And the second is that evidence shows, there was an interesting piece of research done that shows that really every generation regards itself as a single generation in one respect, which is it calls itself Gen Mobile. Every single worker wants to be mobile. And you'd have thought that would be good for WeWork, but it wasn't. But that's another conversation. But the point is that the world of work has never faced more upheaval than it did right at the beginning of industrialization. And the other reason is the triple S of speed, scale, and stress. And let me just talk about stress hyper quickly. 15 million working days in this country are lost to stress every year. 60% of the working days lost in the EU are attributed to stress. $300 billion a year to the American economy. And one of the key sources of stress at work is what's been alluded to before, crap bosses, bad management. So let's just put it out there. The world of work is ill, dysfunctional. It's not all the machine's fault. It's our fault. So we absolutely have to get on top of this. Obviously, my new book coming out in April is The Solution. Do download it. Do pre-order it on Amazon. But actually, we are craving simplicity. You know, Confucius talked about it. Einstein talked about it. Occam's razor talked about it. We crave it. It's not to minimize complexity. It's not to minimize the spectrum between complicated and complex, yada, yada, yada. But we need simplicity. We can't go over that cognitive limit. So that's what I'm thinking about and writing about. I'm going to give you just a couple of ideas from it before I'm down to 3 minutes. Keep it simple, sweetie. Now, it should be keep it simple, stupid. That is the design principle from the 1950s. But hundreds of years ago, I had the great privilege and pleasure of being Maya Angelou's book publicist. And I used to hang out with her when I was in my 20s. I mean, I don't think I'm ever going to better that. And she used to say, keep it simple, but don't be brutal. Keep it simple, sweetie. And, it is an axiom that really holds true. Whatever your problem, whatever your challenge, whatever your opportunity, halve it, divide it, keep it down to its essentials, because if you buy into complexity, complexity will eat into you. The second is that mathematically speaking, the perfect number is a device. We all like a good gimmick, and so mathematicians will tell you it's sort of meaningless, but it does exist as the so-called perfect number because 1, 2, and 3 divide into it. The next perfect number up from that is 28, and the one after that is something like 476. So as an organizing number, we need it. And the embodiment of that hexagon thinking is the honeybee. We know that we need the honeybee more than any. It's actually been declared, I think, by the Royal Geographical Society as the most important species on the planet just 6 days ago. But the reality is that we can learn from the honeybee, not only because it lives and works in the same place, which is a hexagon-shaped honeycomb, and thanks to the smartphone, we now live and work in the same place. But it also is a very instructive example of highly individualized roles in a very complex society where none of it makes sense unless it exists as an entire community. So actually, hexagon thinking is about taking the shape and structure and geometry of nature, but also taking inspiration from probably nature's finest, which is the bee. And finally, this is an idea that I talk about a lot in the book that I think is here, called Fully Connected, which is there is half a hexagon's worth of a trio of factors which are pretty vital to have a handle on, in the same way that we need to look after our diet, our exercise, and our sleep as the world marker of physical and mental well-being. That's still the definition of health, according to the World Health Organization, is the presence of physical, mental, and social well-being. And I've tried to update the social health bit, because in 1948 that sort of meant it sort of meant class, and now it means something different. So the essence of social health is what I call the knot, which is manage your information and knowledge sources, otherwise you will become infobese, right? You get me. You'll become bloated, you'll become distrustful, you will become saturated and not know how to curate your knowledge sources. In terms of networks, B2B, cross-pollination in network science terms is vital for healthy societies. It's a much more interesting concept than the idea of diversity, because diversity needs to be about ideas. So networks are completely critical. And by the way, notice I haven't said networking. Could we just park that idea? And finally, time. I'm out of time. There's 168 hours in the week. Time is so precious and finite. It can't be stretched. No algorithm can do that. Not even Elon Musk can stretch it. And the world of work is completely dysfunctional around timeline, deadline, and diary time. And so if I leave you with one thought, it is treat your diary like your body. Don't put anything in it. Don't let anyone else put anything in it that isn't absolutely on point. And with that, you might have a little bit of social health. Thank you.